Somewhere in eastern China, there is an underground world so massive that building it meant removing over 1 million cubic meters of solid rock, more material than the largest pyramids on Earth ever used. And until 1992, not a single living person knew it existed. Villagers had fished in the ponds above it, and children had swum in the water covering its entrance. For close to 2,000 years, this place sat in total darkness, hidden behind nothing more than a stagnant pond and a piece of local folklore that said the water below was bottomless. Then, one day in June of 1992, 4 farmers decided to find out if that old story was true. 17 days of pumping later, they weren't looking at the bottom of a pond anymore. They were staring down into a cavern the size of a cathedral, carved from ceiling to floor in perfectly parallel lines, almost like it had been cut by machine. This is the story of the Longyou Caves. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why archaeologists, geologists, and engineers from 5 different countries have spent over 30 years studying this site and still can't agree on who built it or why. To understand how strange this discovery is, picture the village of Xianbeikun, tucked into Longyou County in China's Zhejiang province, on the banks of the Ku River. For generations, a small cluster of ponds sat near the base of a hill called Fengguang, Phoenix Hill. Local legend held that these ponds had no bottom. Nobody swam too deep. In June of 1992, 4 farmers decided the legend had gone on long enough. They brought in pumps and started draining the water, expecting mud, maybe some old debris. Definitely not the discovery of a lifetime. 17 days later, the water finally dropped low enough to reveal something impossible. A stone entrance leading into a vast, man-made cavern. That first discovery uncovered 5 enormous chambers. But archaeologists who rushed to the site quickly realized this wasn't an isolated find. Further excavation revealed 19 more caverns, bringing the total to 24 separate underground caves, all carved from the same fine-grained siltstone in the same style. And strangely, none of them physically connected to one another. Within a few years, researchers from China, Japan, Poland, Singapore, and the United States had all made the trip to examine the site. Every single one of them left with more questions than they arrived with. So just how big are we talking? The 24 caves cover a combined area of more than 30,000 square meters, roughly 5 football fields, entirely underground. Individual caverns range from about 18 to 34 meters wide, with ceilings soaring up to 18 or 20 meters high, tall enough to fit a 6-story building inside a single cave. Each chamber is supported by massive stone pillars, left standing because the builders carved around them rather than through them. Whoever designed these spaces understood load-bearing well enough to leave exactly the right amount of rock in place to keep thousands of tons of stone from collapsing. Get the math wrong, and the cave folds in on itself. Get it right, and it survives 2,000 years with no reinforcement. Carving all 24 caverns required removing over 1 million cubic meters of rock. Haul that using a modern 10-ton dump truck, and you'd need roughly 100,000 truckloads. And this was all done presumably using hand tools, underground, by torchlight or oil lamp, with no engineering blueprints that survived to the present day. Here's where the story stops being just impressive and starts being unsettling. Ancient China kept extensive records. We know how the Great Wall was built, how many laborers dug the Grand Canal, and roughly how long it took. Court documents, tax ledgers, and dynastic histories stretch back thousands of years, preserved because ancient Chinese bureaucracies were obsessive documentarians. And yet, for a project that likely required tens of thousands of workers laboring for years, maybe decades, there is not one confirmed imperial record. Not a single tablet, scroll, or inscription naming who ordered it built, who built it, or why. Pottery fragments recovered from the silt have been dated to the Western Han Dynasty, placing some activity at the site more than 2,000 years ago. Some researchers push the date back even earlier, to the late Qin dynasty, the era of China's first emperor. But dating fragments found near a site is very different from finding a record that explains it, and that record simply doesn't exist. For a civilization this well documented, that silence is almost louder than any inscription could have been. Now here's the detail that turned Longyou from impressive ancient engineering into a genuine scientific puzzle. Every wall, ceiling, and pillar in every one of the 24 caves that aren't physically connected to each other, is covered in the exact same pattern. Parallel bands of tool marks, each roughly 60 centimeters wide, filled with tightly spaced, perfectly parallel chisel lines running at a consistent 60-degree angle to the band itself. Think about what that means. This isn't one artisan carving a single wall. It's a pattern repeated with near-mechanical consistency in caverns that don't even connect underground, meaning workers in one cave likely couldn't coordinate directly with workers in another. And yet the spacing, angle, and depth of every groove line up. To modern eyes, this looks almost identical to tracks left by mechanical milling equipment, the kind you'd expect from a rotary cutting tool, not a hand chisel swung 2,000 years ago. That resemblance is exactly what has kept engineers coming back to this site. Some conclude it's proof of an extraordinarily disciplined, standardized labor system, essentially an ancient assembly line with strict quality control. Others aren't so sure a hand chisel explains what they're seeing at all. Either way, replicating this by hand at this scale would be extraordinary, and nobody has definitively proven exactly how it was done. So we've got a project on the scale of a modern quarrying operation, executed with precision that still puzzles engineers, built by an unknown workforce for an unknown purpose, with zero paper trail. That vacuum has been filled with theories, some grounded in solid reasoning, a few that go a lot further out. Let's walk through the major ones, starting with the most conventional. One widely discussed explanation comes from Dr. Chu Liangkai of Zhejiang University, who proposed the caves were storage warehouses, possibly commissioned during the reign of Emperor Xuan of the Western Han Dynasty, documented as having ordered warehouses built in border regions to store food, goods, and military supplies. It's compelling. A hidden, defensible storage network makes strategic sense for an empire, but the caves flood easily. Groundwater seeps in regularly, which is exactly why they were sitting underneath ponds when rediscovered. Storing grain or weapons in a space with a persistent moisture problem, with no ancient way to keep it dry, creates more problems than it solves. Strong theory on paper. The caves themselves seem to argue against it. The simplest explanation is often the most tempting. Maybe this was just a quarry, and ancient builders needed siltstone for construction projects elsewhere. The problem is precision. Quarrying doesn't require uniform 60-degree chisel bands on every ceiling and pillar, especially in areas that would never be seen again once construction finished. Quarry work tends to be rough and efficient. Get the stone out, move on. Longyou's walls show a consistency that looks almost decorative, applied even where there's zero functional reason to be that precise. If this was a quarry, it was one obsessed with finishing work. Quarries simply don't need. A third theory suggests the caves were a hidden military installation, a concealed barracks, armory, or staging ground invisible from above and easily defended, since attackers would have to funnel through narrow stone entrances. The challenge is the same one holding back every theory here. No weapons, no barracks equipment, no remains. Nothing definitively military has ever been recovered. Plausible, but unproven. Here's the theory that's gained real traction in recent years, the one we promised would shift how you see this site. Some researchers now date the earliest excavation work at Longyou to as far back as 212 BC, putting it within the reign of Qin Shi Huang, China's first unified emperor, and the same ruler responsible for the Terracotta Army and the earliest sections of the Great Wall. This was a ruler with the manpower, the ambition, and a documented history of construction on a staggering scale. Projects that, in the case of his tomb complex, were also kept deliberately hidden from the record, guarded by secrecy enforced at the cost of workers' lives. If Longyou was connected to his court, a tomb project, a ceremonial monument, or a structure tied to his obsession with immortality, the absence of records wouldn't be a mystery at all. It would be exactly what you'd expect from a regime known for burying its secrets, sometimes literally. No tomb artifacts have been confirmed at the site, so this remains a theory rather than a settled fact. But it's currently one of the leading explanations taken seriously by mainstream researchers, and it's the one that best explains both the scale of the project and the silence surrounding it. No video about an unexplained ancient site would be complete without the theories on the far edge of the conversation, because when mainstream archaeology can't produce a confirmed answer, that gap tends to get filled fast. Because the tool marks resemble modern rotary machinery so closely, some alternative researchers have suggested the caves point to lost, more advanced ancient technology, or that they simply couldn't have been made by hand tools at all. It's an idea that gets a lot of traction online, and it's easy to see why. The precision really is startling. Worth being honest, there's no physical evidence of any ancient machine tool, and no archaeologist working the site has published findings supporting a lost technology explanation. Most experts attribute the uniformity to an extremely disciplined, standardized labor system. Essentially, ancient China's version of a skilled trade guild, using a rigid, repeatable technique enforced across a massive workforce. Discipline, not mystery machinery, is the leading scientific explanation. But the fact that a 2,000-year-old hand-carved wall is even being compared to machine tooling tells you how extraordinary this craftsmanship really is. One more piece of the puzzle. About 200 kilometers northwest of Longyou, along the Shinan River, sits another set of underground caverns known as the Huashan Grottos. On the surface, they look remarkably similar. Same carving style, same underground scale. But dating evidence suggests Huashan was carved over 1,000 years later, tied to a completely different dynasty. This style of monumental cave carving wasn't a one-time event. It may be a technique that resurfaced more than once across Chinese history, which only deepens the mystery of why almost none of it made the official record. More than 30 years after that pond was first drained, the honest answer is this: nobody knows for certain who carved the Longyou Caves, why, or how they achieved that precision underground, in the dark, without a single surviving blueprint. What we do know is that it required a workforce, a plan, and an engineering discipline that rivals anything else we associate with the ancient world. And somehow it was kept almost completely off the books. If this story has you wanting to see the caves yourself, here's what you need to know. The Longyou Caves, also called the Longyou Grottos, sit at Fenghuang Hill near Xi'an Village in Longyou County, Kuzhou City, Zhejiang Province, roughly a 2-hour high-speed train ride from Hangzhou and 2 to 4 hours from Shanghai depending on your route. The easiest way in is high-speed rail to Longyou Railway Station, then a short taxi ride straight to the site. The caves are generally open from around 8 in the morning until roughly 4:30 or 5:30 in the afternoon, and entrance tickets typically run between 60 and 100 Chinese yuan. Worth checking current pricing before you go, since it can change seasonally. Of the 24 caves discovered, only a handful, around 5, are currently open to the public, chosen for accessibility and visual impact. Cave number 1 is the smallest of these, but arguably the most famous, home to an ancient carving nicknamed the horse, bird, and fish relief, believed to date back to the original construction. Most visitors spend 1 to 4 hours exploring, and the temperature inside stays notably cool year-round, a genuinely pleasant escape during a hot Zhejiang summer. If you're building a longer China itinerary, the caves pair naturally with a stop in Kuzhou or a wider loop through Zhejiang Province, well set up for day trips from both Hangzhou and Shanghai. So, imperial granary, hidden military base, forgotten monument to China's first emperor, or something we genuinely haven't figured out yet? The Longyou Caves remain one of the only sites on Earth where a civilization famous for writing everything down left us a project this massive and said absolutely nothing about it. If you enjoyed digging into this one, subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries history hasn't fully solved, and let me know in the comments which theory you find most convincing, or if you've got one of your own. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.